You are about to enjoy a Firearms Radio Network podcast. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the individual co-hosts and do not reflect the official policy or position of the Firearms Radio Network and or their employers. Viewer discretion is advised. This is especially true on live shows. If you like what we're doing and would like to help support the show, visit patreon.com/afteractionproject. If you'd like to throw us some free support and appreciation, we would greatly appreciate a 5-star review on iTunes or wherever you're listening to this podcast. Tonight's episode, just like every episode, is brought to you by the Firearms Radio Network and the Range Buddy app. Be sure to check out the other great podcasts on the Firearms Radio Network by visiting firearmsradio.net. And tonight we are joined by Dan Brady and Tim Kelly of Apache Solutions, and we're going to be discussing their Do It in the Dark course. So before we get into it, talk to our listeners about how the heck you guys came up with that name for the course, and is it what they're initially thinking, or what's this class about, guys? And Dan, we'll kick it over to you to start that off.
So I've been a police officer for 23 years now, and I spent a good portion of that working evenings and midnight shifts. Therefore, I spent a lot of time with a flashlight in my hand, flashlight on my gun, and a variety of other lighting tools over the course of time. I was very fortunate to be coming up in my law enforcement career as the evolution of lighting, artificial lighting, white light, has really jumped into high gear. My very first, patrol light that I was issued by my department was I think it was a 4D cell mag light, and I think it put out a grand total of about 40 lumens of light and like half a candela. And I think it was for Christmas, probably my first year as a cop, I got a Surefire 6P that put out a blazing 60 lumens, and that was a colossal amount of artificial light at that point in time. And since then, I have probably spent somewhere in the vicinity of 5 figures chasing new flashlights, more lumens, more candela, longer battery life, better lighting color, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I have spent an obscene amount of time and treasure in looking at what is the best lighting solution for my particular instances. So Tim and I began to have a conversation about, well, cop work doesn't really apply to our target demographic of the everyday carry citizen. That's where our Apache's, bread and butter, meat and potatoes, however you want to put it, really is. And Tim can kind of speak more to that about how that came to be. But he was like, well, why don't you look at creating a class that does target our demographic and see if we can't put something together that is meaningful in the context of the everyday carry citizen. So I went about doing that, and I came up with this class, Do It in the Dark. We were kind of floundering around on a name. I'm not particularly creative, and Tim, I don't remember the exact context, but Tim said, why don't we just do it in the dark? And I'm like, yep, there we go. So that's how that happened.
That's awesome. Hey, you touched briefly on your training background and your firearms experience. Tim, I want to kick that over to you. Talk to us, introduce yourself to our listeners. Give us a little bit of background on your training experience and what got you into the firearms training industry.
Okay, sure. So I'm Tim Kelly. I'm the owner of Apache. I started this business back in 2017 with the intentions of creating a stronger and more competent armed society. Before that, I spent about 8 years in the United States Marine Corps Infantry. Wanted to do that ever since I was a little rugrat, got to live my dream. And in 2013, I ended up getting out, earned my mechanical engineering degree, and set out on a new journey to learn how to design and manufacture firearms and firearms components. So I did that for a period of time, kind of grew a pretty significant distaste for it. After a while, a lot of sacrificing structural integrity in order to raise profit margin, stuff that I just couldn't get on board with. So I left. And I guess to make a long story short, I uncovered a very serious need for firearms training in our local community for the everyday armed citizen. And one of the greater pills that I had to swallow was the fact that I served in the Marine Corps, and all of the training and experience that I had, it did not directly transfer over to, my life now as a civilian. So we kind of had to create something for that. And I looked around for different models of what I would like to see happen here. And nothing really fit what I was looking for. You have your typical gun range where you go out and poke holes in paper and stuff like that. And every once in a while, there'll be an instructor or a range safety officer that tells you what to do. But there's really not a whole lot of formal firearms training in our area, unless it's a cookie cutter, institutional course or a state mandated class or something like that. There's no real firearms training. So what we ended up doing was structuring our business a lot like a gym with a private trainer. So folks will come out and they'll sign up for a one-on-one session with us for an hour, maybe 2 hours. We meet them where they are. We help them establish goals, and then we help them meet those goals along the way. So the closest thing I can compare that to is actually going to a gym and saying, oh man, I suck at bench press. Well, this guy can help you out. And they get you going, and then encourage you to go, practice on your own time in the gym and that type of thing. And that's kind of what we do here is we teach them the skill and then give them the knowledge and the tools necessary to go and practice that drill or skill set, whatever it is. And then we just continue to polish them up. So, one of the main reasons why, as I said before, that we thought this was necessary was, most people in our community thinks that if you want to learn how to shoot a gun, you go and take a concealed carry class. And I'm pretty sure that's kind of a common trend across the remaining states that still require a class in order to get your concealed carry permit. It's just because there's no other standard out there. And I felt like that's really what we were lacking in the training community, or the gun community, actually, was a standard. There is no metric to hold yourself to. You can sit back and talk about how, you grew up around guns, and that's not a metric. That doesn't mean anything. It doesn't carry any weight. Dan can tell me that, he qualified such and such on, with his department, and pretty much with a quick Google search, I can figure out just how much competence and skill level that he has just based off of that one qualification. Same with other law enforcement agencies, military, and that type of thing. But for civilians, the common thing you get is, I grew up around guns, and it doesn't really mean anything. So we wanted to create that metric, and I feel like we're doing a pretty good job with that.
Nice. I love that approach where it's the gym setting, right? Where it's going to come in, we're going to meet you where you're at, both location and skill set, and setting some goals and hashing it out and getting them to do that. I'd imagine, the smaller training blocks and the do it in the dark course, right? The smaller training blocks, though, you're going to get more bang for your buck as a student, as an instructor. It's going to allow you to really individualize that training for that student, to really maximize what they're able to really do, right? The potential. It's going to be a shorter learning curve. Oftentimes, if you take a class as a student, you show up and, you don't know any better. So you show up at class and there's 10 or 12 other folks on the line, and you're being supervised as you shoot drills with very little coaching or very little instruction. So before we get into any more of that, Jonathan, talk to us a little bit about your background in training and what brought you to Apache Solutions, and how you ended up in their Do It in the Dark course.
Well, my background in firearms is kind of an interesting one, in that Tim and Dan I go back a long way before we started working together nowadays through Apache, and who I trained for at Gunset Training Group in Dayton, Ohio. I came into the gun world coming up as a student shooter, mostly with Tactical Defense Institute here in Southern Ohio. That's John Benner's outfit over here. That's a huge influence in the East. Also, Greg Ellerfrit's Active Response Training, and then Dave Spalding of Handgun Combatives. That was a lot of my early influence in the shooting world. Well, I was also a 20-year professional firefighter and paramedic, and a lot of what was going on in my world was kind of this really interesting focus on trauma management in the dynamic environment, and there was a lot of places where firefighters were crossing into law enforcement realms, and then with kind of increases in the active shooter response realm, we were doing a lot of really great things from a trauma standpoint. Well, I felt that too much of the focus from the trauma world was being placed on tactical EMS and CONTOMs and TIMs, and everyone was just so focused on being a SWAT medic and all this stuff. I ended up writing a class called Real World Trauma that Dan and Tim are familiar with, and I ended up teaching that class in the gun world. That was kind of how I came into the gun world. And then I was just coming up as a student and doing a lot of AI work. So that was kind of how I got into the world. Well, and then even as I grew into a good place as an instructor and was working around some great people, I finally, I very much stayed focused on being a permanent student. I train a lot. I spend as much time in the student aspect of our world as I do in the instructor aspect of our world, and I just love it a lot. So coming into the Apache crew, I think it was a year ago. I walked into an ADC class, and there's Tim and Dan, and I'm like, oh my God. Well, I'd had some other friends in Apache and met some of the other guys because they had come up to Gunset to take some AR classes. And I walk into this class, and I hadn't seen Tim in years. I hadn't seen Tim, oh God, what, Tim, 10 years? I mean, it was a minute. And sure enough, then here comes Big Dan. And I was like, oh my God, that I hadn't seen these guys forever. And immediately I was just back in the fold. And since then, it's just anytime I can work with Apache or hang out and just have fun. I love being around Apache, and their instructional methodology is phenomenal. And from a student aspect, their product is hard to match or beat in the gun world. I train all over the country with pretty much everybody, and what I've seen from the view of a student, a dedicated student, has been some phenomenal things with Apache.
Nice. Dan, I want to kick the next question back to you. However, I'm not sure if we went into your training background and how you got into the firearms industry. So if you want to expand on that, I know my initial question kind of skirted around that. Feel free to do so. And then I want to talk about the course requirements. So after you expand on that introduction, if you want to go into the course requirements, do I have to show up with a flashlight? Is it weapon mounted that I have to have, handheld, round count, all that good stuff?
Sure. Like I said earlier, I've been a cop for 23 years before that. Like Tim, I was in the Marine Corps Infantry. We actually served in the same unit. I was there first by about 10 years because I'm substantially older than he is. And Tim and I ended up bumping into each other at Handgun Combatives instructor course with Dave Spalding. That's how we met. We figured out we lived a few hours away, so we kind of rolled into this working together thing. So yeah, when I started being a police officer, I very quickly realized that the handgun training was substandard. I kind of simultaneously got into competitive shooting with, at the time, the very, very young IDPA. This was, 2000, 2001, when that when I started at that, and IDPA was only a few years old at that point. And your average IDPA shooter could just annihilate any law enforcement officers I was aware of in terms of just straight skill with a handgun. And so I made friends with some really great people. I got introduced to Dave Spalding in, I think, 2004 or 3, about 20 years ago, and became kind of a disciple of his for quite some time. I believe it was like 2015 or 16. I met Jonathan Willis at a handgun combatives course, Pennsylvania, wasn't it? Yeah. I think that was the course where I actually won my 2x2x2 coin. I think that's where that happened, but I'm not dead positive. I'm getting old. So yeah, I kind of meandered here and there with doing some SWAT and SRT stuff, and kind of switched over towards rifle stuff for a little while, and then migrated back to patrol work and was really more focused on handgun, started doing a little bit more competitive shooting, trained with a wide variety of trainers across the country. And then, like I mentioned, bumped into Tim, and I had just kind of started working on the idea of hanging my own shingle out there and being, Dan Brady's super awesome handgun pistol shooter guy school. Wasn't really clear on what I wanted to do. And when Tim came out and told me exactly what Apache Solutions was all about, I was like, well, that sounds like exactly what I want to do. So how about I just work for you, man? And fortunately, he was pretty amenable to that. And he's been very, very generous with allowing me some pretty heavy creative license with kind of directing sort of my own path. And as long as I come to him with some level of coherent curriculum, he's like, yeah, let's build this, man. Let's put this thing together and make it something real. And he has a significantly more organized brain than I do. So he's instrumental in making it a logical, systematic, and progressive form. And it's really been very, very helpful. So yeah, that's kind of how we came to be working together, along with the rest of the cadre. We have a number of instructors and coaches with Apache Solutions, all of whom are just fantastic people. As for the course, Do It in the Dark, what you need is a handgun, a few magazines. You do need a flashlight. You do not need a weapon-mounted flashlight. It is encouraged if you do have one available to you. The course does vary a little bit in terms of structure based on range restrictions, because there are times where, especially with low light shooting, a lot of range facilities will have significant restrictions on what you can do and what you can't do. So some of how the class is structured is a little bit amorphous, but the information that gets pushed across and the real heavy context on everyday carry citizen focus on what is a real application of low light is I think where this particular low light course stands out.
Tim, I want to kick it over to you. Talk a little bit more about, who the course is for. It sounds like it's, I was going to ask, is it law enforcement or civilian, but it sounds like it's for the everyday citizen, right? The guy that puts on a gun every day and it is about his life. So talk to us a little bit more about the structure of the course, some of those range restrictions where you've had to come up with creative solutions. I'm not aware of, I'm in New Mexico, and I'm not aware of a public range where you could do any low light shooting for 9 or 10 months out of the year. So how are you overcoming some of those obstacles?
So the one that can y'all hear me okay? I was messing with my mute button a minute ago. All right. So one of the cool things we did, we've been doing with our classes really ever since COVID, I'd say, is we started breaking down a lot of it into like smaller, more condensed and like more like skill centric workshops. So they're about 4 hours, 3 to 4 hour blocks of instruction. So with Dan's class, it's really two pieces or two components that he can expand on for, an entire day, or he can do, or he can do 2 4 hour formats. So the one up in Ohio that Dan taught was a 4 hour block called Do It in the Dark Interactive Aspects. Now, technically in that class, you really didn't even need to have a gun, right? So long as you had a desire to be there and wanted to learn about light performance for the everyday armed citizen, then that'd be a good class for you. So there was no round count needed or anything like that. It was a class that was done in the daylight. So we had a classroom that allowed us the opportunity for completely blacking out everything inside there, so that we could use flashlights and in that area. And then when we needed to go outside to practice gun work, like single-handed shooting and handheld manipulation with a firearm and that type of thing, we could just walk outside to a berm and do it in dry fire. It wasn't something that we had to do in live fire. It's stuff that we could just go over there. And then he delves into the again, the more interactive side of things of how you can use light as a defensive tool. And then we do that in more of a scenario, like a very short scenario type of thing. So if we're pretty flexible as far as like how we teach the material, we can pretty well do it anywhere and stay well within, some of these range restrictions and that type of thing. So far, Dan's slated to teach this in Maine, up at House Guns, and they have an indoor range. So we have the ability to turn off the lights there again, and do live fire right there on the range, just as if you would in an outdoor setting. Same thing with Ken Howard's place up in Pennsylvania, Lewisberry, Pennsylvania. We'll be teaching it there as well, and we'll be able to shut off all the lights and do most of that stuff indoors and be perfectly fine. Now, I'm aware that some ranges have restrictions. You can't shoot past X time or something along those lines. So that's why we were trying to be creative with how we deliver this content. Can we still get across a lot of really good information to the student and stay within some of the boundaries that are put on us by and restrictions that are put on us some of these ranges.
Would you say there's, when it comes to low light shooting and the everyday carrier, are there certain things that have to be practiced, in the dead of night, right? So it's under complete nightfall. Or is it something that you can do, 85, 90 or 95% of it, live fire during the day to work on the manipulations? And I guess does actually activating a flashlight at night, is that something that you think is a necessary component for low light training?
I definitely do, but that's definitely Dan's baby. Go for it, man. I know he's chomping.
So
to answer that.
I would say that 90% of concepts and manipulations can be instructed and demonstrated and practiced in lighted conditions. That absolutely can take place, especially for the knowledge acquisition portions of the class, the skill acquisition portions of the class, where the ideas being pushed across the context of the everyday average citizen. One of the big things that got pushed a couple of years ago is that weapon mounted lights are mandatory now. Was a thing that got kind of pushed out by a couple of people. And in the context of a citizen carrying, that just isn't true. It's just not true. The use of a weapon mounted light is an extremely niche area outside the confines of your own home. And I dive into that a little bit. The fact of the matter is that when most light usage is occurring, you have one hand occupied, which leaves you only one hand to access your firearm. The vast majority of even the training community do not practice single hand draws and single hand manipulations. They just don't. It's not as fast. It's not as sexy. It doesn't look as cool on the gram, and it tends to fall by the wayside. A lot of marketing about lighting tools has used a lot of buzzwords that don't necessarily have the same, what would you say, the same weight of real meaning as they do in the advertising. A lot of folks are chasing lumen count for what they want for their. It's got 3,000 lumens. Fantastic. What does that mean to you? It's real bright. Yes, it is. What can you do with that? What does that help you do? And a lot of people are just like, it's real bright, and that's kind of the end of their knowledge stream. And I would really like to. Jonathan's over there playing with his flashlight, and I want to get a lot of people past some of the misconceptions about how to use light, what it's really for, and how to integrate it in a I carry a gun mindset.
I want to come back to the misconceptions. Before we do that, I want to give Jonathan a chance to speak on what the first few hours of that class looked like, and what were some of the, what was the student body makeup as a student. Jonathan, what did you see from some of your peers in that class?
Well, I caught a module of Dan's. It's a condensed version in one of the AED classes that focuses on intermediate defensive tactics, which are lights and sprays. And then I've been with Dan. I got an impromptu lab where he called out my light and took me out into a dark cul-de-sac and taught me about the photonic barrier and all kinds of things like that. The classes that we hosted in Xenia, 2 weeks ago, guys?
2 or 3.
Yeah. It was, your first day was probably 7. So for the Do It in the Dark crew was, and it was mostly pretty high, or I'd say moderate to high level shooters, wouldn't you say?
Oh yeah.
And they were the group of people who were going to be with the AEDC courses the next 2 days. It's funny that what information Dan brought to the crew. Dan's an activator, and everyone walked away from that class having a total reset on their understanding of light use as a defensive tool, the differences between a defensive light and administrative light, which Dan, it so lovingly schooled me on in about 30 seconds. Is that me? Everyone walked away from that having a better understanding of how to use light for their day-to-day carry situation. Everyone in these classes are everyday 100% carriers, and that we're ready to step up to an understanding of light use as a defensive tool.
So flashlights and lumens and all that other stuff, right? There are a ton of misconceptions, and it's, as somebody who isn't a subject matter expert in this field, I come across a ton of information, and a lot of it is conflicting information. So I want to take this opportunity, and I guess we can start off with Dan and talk about some of those misconceptions, and specifically, if we're considering a flashlight that we might have to use in a defensive situation, I want to talk about some of the problems that mid-level or entry-level, I guess, lights might might pose, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. So one of the things that people will chase that lumen count, and at any sort of distance, or if you have present, and you will in most instances, what is referred to as a photonic barrier. The best, most easily thought of example of that is if it's dark and somebody pulls into your driveway with their headlights on, can you see who's inside their car? No, you can't, because you now have this photonic barrier. You have light coming at you. You don't have a way to see past that. If you're driving down the highway and somebody's got their high beams coming at you, you actually start to lose any sort of visual acuity on your lane as that gets closer and closer. And that's why everybody flashes their lights, and usually their middle fingers along with it, because it takes away so much of your visual assessment of your environment. One of the things I kind of dive into in the lecture portion of it is the fact that human beings are very visual creatures. Up to 95% of the environmental information that we take in is from vision. We have, compared to most mammals, we have very poor hearing, we have very poor sense of smell, and those senses don't give us the same sort of assessment of our environment as our eyes do. And when you take away somebody's ability to see their environment, it really gives you a very significant tactical advantage in how you can address whatever situation it is that you are coming in front of at this moment in time. Conversely, if somebody takes away your vision, you lose a great deal of advantage. So a light that can penetrate photonic barriers, and the term that is utilized for that is candela. The sort of very short adage is that candela is king when it comes to a defensive light. You want a handheld light that pushes as much candela as you can in a useful pattern to be able to penetrate photonic barriers. And I've had people try to demonstrate to me that my $30 light's fine. Look at this. And, they go into their absolutely pitch black backyard and they, shine their $30 light and their whole entire backyard lights up. Well, great. You have a pitch black backyard. I could light a couple of candles or a tiki torch in the backyard, and I can light the whole backyard up when it's pitch black. It's when I have those pools of light. If you have a convenience store and the front side of the convenience store is very, very well lit, what do you see right around the corner from that? Nothing. You can't see anything because it is pitch black, because on the front side of it, you have all of this light coming into your eyes and you can't see past that. That is an environmental photonic barrier that you come across every single day. And the ability to open up that visual information requires a light that can push some pressure. If you think about light like you think about water, you think about like a water hose. You turn a water hose on, it doesn't have a nozzle on it. That water just kind of comes out and it just kind of falls on the ground in front of you. If you put a nozzle on that and you can focus that spray, the same amount of water is coming out, but it is in a much higher pressure stream. It can go a lot further. It can push through a lot more stuff. That's candela. Best way I could describe it real quickly.
So using that same analogy, would lumens be the amount of water?
Yeah.
Okay. Because that for the life of me, I know it's going to be my next question is like, what the hell is the difference between lumen and candela? Can you make that simple for me? So That's awesome. I like that. Tim, talk to us a little bit about the skills that you want students to come away from after attending this block of instruction.
I'd say, I mean, for my part in the class, I'd say one of the things that we really tried to help people out with is how to use it in a defensive manner. And I've heard a ton of instructors and a lot of other classes talk about, lights as a defensive tool, and just shoot them, shine them in the face with this and it'll blind them. Well, sure, you can shoot somebody with a bullet and it'll poke a hole through them, right? How deep can we go into that? Like, do we really need to shine the light in the face of everyone? And when we do, what exactly is happening? What's taking place? How much visual information are we really taking away from that person? And how does that make that person respond? And it's funny, the reactions that we get from a lot of our students is that they don't realize just how much they're giving themselves away when they just have the light shine down at the ground and they're having a conversation with the person. They can see them and they can see each other, right? But when they raise that light up to the person's face, it's surprising to me that they don't realize that they're really stopping them. They're stopping them in place. And if they continue to move, they're going to trip and fall over something or something along those lines. It really does a great job of kind of buying yourself some time so you can do something with your hands so they can't see it. It buys you time to get away, to put an obstacle between you and them. It's a fantastic tool, but most of the time we just chalk it up to, oh yeah, all I gotta do is shine a light in their face. And I chalk that up as equivalent of, all I gotta do is point and shoot, right? There's different techniques to this. We came up with a couple of ditties to try and try to assist students with that, like feet, waist, face. If you encounter somebody having the light shine down at their feet, and if you feel like you need to see what's going on with them, you can shine it at their waist, and you're still not being like socially awkward or really rude to them by shining them in the face with 60,000 candela or something, right? But if you see that there's something in their hands, or they're just off or something like that, and you feel like you really need to use it in a defensive manner, then you shine it in their face, and that limits their ability to do whatever it is that you were so suspicious of.
That makes sense. And I have it. I carry a flashlight with me. And I'll talk about it a little bit later. That the brand, and I want to get some brand recommendations. But I hadn't thought about it. The feet, the waist, or the face. It's usually an admit light, right? I needed to light up something where I need to see where I'm not necessarily investigating or trying to figure out what the heck somebody's doing or trying to alter their behavior. So Jonathan, what was your biggest takeaway from this course?
My biggest takeaway from working with Dan to better understand lighting, well, first and foremost, was I immediately understood the difference between lumens and candela, which I'd struggled with for a long time. I might be as old as Dan. I'm not really sure, but I had pretty incipient understanding of lights and what was a good one and what was truly applicable to in the defensive context. I just thought I was checking a box as an everyday carrier by just having a light on my person, any light. Now I understand how to work lighting into my use of force continuum as an everyday carrying civilian. I've always had a clear understanding that the gun isn't my only solution, but specifically because of Dan's delivery of this content, I now understand what an important part of my use of force continuum is the light, as well as my better understanding of chemical irritants. But that helped me a lot. And I've been in direct contact with every person that took these blocks of instruction. And literally within 3 days, every person who didn't already own one went out and they got their ordering process going on their Dan Brady recommended defensive lighting solution. So those are the two big things I took away from it. My use of force continuum and an understanding of the difference of candela versus lumens, and that what I thought was able to really meet this usage really wasn't it. It really wasn't that. And I appreciate that from Dan's content.
Dan, can you dive into that a little bit more, the continuum? Where does this fall on the use of force spectrum for the everyday carrier?
Almost anywhere you want it to, based on your context, right? One of the first things that I cover in the lecture block is that in no state in America is blasting somebody in the face with 100,000 candela a crime. It's not an assault. It might be rude, you turn around and all of a sudden they can't see because, the eyes of God are right in their face. That will take somebody aback. And if it's not warranted, if there's not a reason behind that, yes, it's rude, but the cops aren't going to be knocking on your door and, asking you to defend that decision. So it can really be utilized, like Tim said, the feet, waist, face, the application of light in your surroundings. You can cover a wide variety. You can kind of hone in on a specific area, or you can really spot danger and start utilizing it defensively. Penetrate any photonic barriers that you have to deal with, and simultaneously create one of your own in order to give you room to move, give you time to verbally manage unknown contacts, access an other tool like chemical irritants, sprays, or if justified, your firearm. But where to work that in, it's pretty simple to, if it's dark out, or if you are dealing with an area that has intermittent light or low light, it's pretty easy to just reach in your pocket and pull out your lighting tool and just have it in your hand. There's nothing hostile. There's nothing outwardly aggressive about holding onto a flashlight. You can integrate it pretty much anywhere. Where training comes in, where scenario driven exercises come in, begin to help you define for yourself where and how best to utilize it, based on your own everyday context, right? If you live where Tim lives, and there's 14 human beings within 5 or 10 miles, all right, so that might be a little bit of a stretch on the ruralness of Tim's place, but it's pretty dark out there. That's one thing. If you live in my neighborhood where, there's a heavy duty sodium vapor light every 150 feet or so, that's a little bit different because the shadows that are created from sodium vapor lights are very, very deep, very black shadows. If you don't have your headlights on when you pull into my driveway, I could be standing right next to my house and you won't see me. They're that black of shadows that I could be 10 or 15 feet away from you and you simply can't see me. So working in a flashlight to your particular context just takes a little bit of thought.
Let's talk about the different brand recommendations. Are there lights that you see show up in class that are commonly failing? And this is for Tim or Dan.
As far as like lights failing and stuff, no, I haven't seen a whole lot of that. I'm sure Dan probably has more so than myself. Um, I'm really big on. I don't tie myself to any specific brand name. I'm not a Ford versus Chevy kind of guy. I'm a firm believer in will it do what I need it to do. So I'm sure Dan would agree to this. Like the Cloud defensive flashlights, their MCH handheld is fantastic, and anything you get from Mod Light is going to be exceptional. So far, that's what I'm seeing. If you need something that's a little bit more on the easier on the pocket, Streamlight HLX is very affordable and a great tool. Something I try to buy for my family members for their birthday or something like that, because it's a really affordable light and it's not as easy to pack around as like the Cloud MCH. Their EDC light. It's the one I've got. It's a smaller little guy. It's much easier to pack around. But once again, man, it's about can it meet a metric? But first, you need to know whether or not what those metrics actually are. And I think that's where Dan's class comes into play there.
Dan, what about you? Kind of the same line. Is there something? I know Cloud is kind of the gold standard as far as lights are considered. Are there any other lights that you would recommend that Tim didn't touch on?
The big one that is high performance, not very well known, is Malkoff, Malkoff. That's what I'm carrying right now. I'm carrying a Malkoff. It's an 18650 battery. My buddy and also fellow Apache coach, Zach, is a super nerd when it comes to flashlights in terms of the technical specs. He has a lumen tube that will actually measure how many lumens are coming out. It's not advertised. He has a lux meter so that he can actually measure how much candela it is putting out at what rate. It's like he follows the actual Plato ANSI specs of how far away the lux meter has to be. He's way out there. But he's the one who kind of turned me on to the Malkoff lights. And the one that I'm carrying right now, I think he measured it somewhere around 100,000 candela. It's really, really bright. And it's actually pretty pocketable. I've been carrying it around all day, and it's a nice light. I'm probably gonna buy one. As Tim mentioned, the OKW from Mod Light, fantastic light. There's some others that are out there. In terms of lights failing, I have seen a number of lights fail from police officers. Generally they are I bought a Ozark light from Walmart, or a no name brand thing from Dick's Sporting Goods or whatever, to use as a tactical flashlight. Some light's better than no light, but people need to make some more informed purchases. Other considerations out there, stuff like thermal regulation. How hot does this light get in your hand? Because when you put out that amount of light, guess what happens? Metal heats up. There are a couple of lights out there that if you leave them on for 2.5 or 3 minutes, that light body will get up towards 130 degrees, which is real hot. I mean, it's enough that if you hold on to it for a while, it's going to burn you. That is a consideration. Is it important? Well, that depends on your particular context. So, So Surefire, obviously, they've been around for quite some time. They put out some pretty good products. Cloud Defensive, Malkoff, Mod Light. And yeah, the Streamlight HLX for a handheld. You can usually find those somewhere around the $80 range, $85 range. Is that about what you're finding, Tim?
Yeah.
Yeah, about that. The Malkovs are in the low 200s. Same with the MCH, and then the mod lights, they start to get kind of pricey.
What about the Olight hate? There's a lot of
So the Olight hate. Now this is from a guy who probably I've probably owned about 8 or 9 Olights over the course of the years, because before I became pretty informed in this, I did the same thing. I just chased those lumens. Oh, this got more lumens. I need to get that. Like with some firearms we could name, quality control is where dollars start being spent, and thus it ends up being more expensive to the consumer. Are there Olight products out there that will function perfectly well for their intended use and for a indeterminate length of time? Yes, there absolutely are. Over the law of big numbers, will you see more failures than the higher quality control lights? Yes, you will. That's about what that's going to boil down to. I'm not going to be in here just trying to trash a specific maker. I don't know enough about their individual procedures to make those sort of very harsh judgments. Would I recommend Olight products, generally speaking, for defensive use? No, I wouldn't. It's just not. I believe heavily in quality control, right? And that's where I start to take exception with when it comes to defensive. You want to buy an admin light from Olight? Go right ahead. They got hundreds of them of different models. I've got 1 or 2 little tiny rechargeable ones, put out like 80, 90 lumens. It'll light up the interior of my car. It'll light up under my car. If I'm looking for my keys or something like that, put it on a key ring. Go right ahead. Defensively, I believe in spending a little bit of money on the tools that you're going to stake your life on.
and it sounds like you're not saving much, right? I mean, if you get a Streamlight, the HLX for in the $80 price range, I don't know of an Olight that's going to save you more than $20 or $30 maybe. And
Not that has the same performance parameters. The HLX, the HLX puts out what I consider to be sort of the power floor for Candela, which is 20,000 Candela. 20,000 Candela will penetrate most photonic barriers at a reasonable defensive distance. It is pocketable, but like Tim said, not quite as ergonomic and comfortable as some of the other models out there. But if you're on a budget, it'll certainly work.
when somebody's looking for a defensive light, what are those minimum specs that you're looking for? Is there a minimum lumen, or does lumen become irrelevant once you reach a certain threshold of Candela?
I wouldn't say irrelevant, just less important. Some of the products out there are putting out between 600 and 700 lumens, and they're north of 70,000 Candela. That's perfectly fine. You want to look for something that's rugged. You want to look for something you can drop out of your pocket on the concrete, and it's still going to work. The lights that I have mentioned so far by name, you're going to do just fine with any of those.
Jonathan, what light did you have going into the class? And it sounds like you made a buying decision after. So what did you end up going with after that class?
So I went into the class with the, I think it's Streamlight Wedge. Is that the one it is, Dan? So in my normal day-to-day world, I'm a real estate professional, and I go into a lot of homes, and I'm all over houses all the time. So I always needed a flashlight and felt that I was complementing my defensive needs by just having one on me. I am a guy that I trust my peers, and I trust my mentors, and I trust the experts, vetted experts, of course. And just knowing what Dan was able to make me understand, I'm not going to go out there and try to reinvent the wheel. I came away from the class and immediately ordered a Cloud Defensive MCH HC High Candela. And I was a little bit concerned initially about its size, but I've been carrying it now for a couple of weeks and absolutely love it. You'll see immediately I also added the retention ring from retentionring.com. And I actually love the way this light is able to be deployed. I've been pretty surprised with how much I like this approach to lighting. And I came in, like Dan said, right at about, I think my before tax amount on this one ended up being $202. So that was pretty pleasing for what I was expecting, knowing that I was going to go with Cloud Defensive or Mod Light, and that worked out really well for me. So I'm really happy with my understanding of lighting, and that I was able to, and that all of our training friends here in Dayton, after taking this content, were able to move forward and buy defensive lights. So kudos to Dan and Tim for delivering this important content, because they empowered a lot of people with some great information to go out and make a choice for a quality piece of equipment that could save their lives. So that's pretty cool.
Getting back to the student side of things, Tim, talk to us a little bit about some other obstacles that students face coming into this class. Are there things that students struggle with that you're really looking for them to overcome? Or is it more of a, hey, here's some knowledge and information that you guys should have that you probably haven't considered or you haven't been given?
Well, as far as that goes, I mean, this is Dan's class, so I mean that's something that he would be more fit to answer. But I will tell you that our student base is for the everyday carry, the everyday armed citizen, and I know a lot of the obstacles that most of these folks face is that they don't know what they don't know, right? So if we do actually get them out of the gun store and into the classroom, they'll likely run into, so long as they keep an open mind, they'll run into a lot of things that they just didn't expect or they hadn't learned previously in their days of growing up around guns, or in their days in the guns, in the gun store banter and that type of thing. That's some of the major challenges that they'll likely have to hurdle over. As far as the light stuff goes, though, again, that's a Dan question.
We'll kick it back to Dan in just a second. I think so. If student shows up for you, Tim, and he's like, "Hey, this is where I'm at. I've taken a concealed carry course. I've taken an intro to defensive handgun course." At what point are you kind of steering that student to the do it in the dark course? And when should a student start looking at low light training?
That's excellent. All right, I can definitely handle that one. So if with our student dynamic, like our private sessions, especially when we first started, you have a lot of folks that would come out and say, "Well, you were in the military, man. Can you teach me some stuff like CQB or how to be an underwater scout sniper or something like that?" And I tell them, yeah, we could definitely go over some cool tactical stuff, but I really don't have time for it. All right, I want to reserve that time for the person that's actually really needs the practical training for their everyday life, right? So we found ourselves teaching a lot of the 50Bs, the folks that have like they have a restraining order out against a crazed ex-husband, and really I just didn't want to occupy my time teaching somebody how to operate operationally. when I could be helping someone like that, so that's really what kind of pushed my drive to really let's make this practical. Let's stay away from the hype and that sort of thing, and just make it practical for that everyday student. So most of the time, a lot of the folks will find out about us because they've taken a concealed carry class, and we do get that question a lot. What do I do next? What class do I do next? And honestly, anymore used to, I'd be like, okay, you need to go this way, you need to do that. Now I'm like, just show up, and just show up. If you want to really refine it and figure out what that answer is, go take a private session, and your private instructor will help you determine which class is going to be best for you. But if not, man, and you just want to jump into the class, jump into the class. If all you've got is concealed carry under your belt, and you jump into Dan's, do it in the dark class, are you going to be struggling? Yeah, but maybe it's going to be a wake up call to say, oh man, I didn't know what I thought I knew. And now I know just a place where I can get that figured out, or I know just the people to help me with this. So I don't, I guess if it were me, what I would suggest is they take our everyday carry class after they've taken a concealed carry class. That generally gives them a solid baseline on some of the more essential skills that they're going to need to focus on in order to become more familiar with a handgun. And then through that class, they'll be given some skills and tips and tricks on how to make those, refine those skills. And then, if they wanted to jump into a class, if they're struggling on a specific subject and they want to jump into like our elements of the concealed draw workshop or something like that, maybe they're struggling with their draw stroke. Well, that class specifically hyper focuses on the elements of the concealed draw, so they can jump into that. Otherwise, they get those skills fine-tuned, and then they jump into our advancing everyday carry class. And that's generally when they're going to bump into, to Dan teaching his low light class, maybe the Friday before or something like that, like what we did for these guys up in Ohio. But the biggest thing is, man, for me anymore, I try not to say, hey, you need to go fork out X amount of dollars to take this class. I say, pick one, man. Just pick one. Just get your feet wet, get in it, and pick one. That's it.
Yeah, it's refreshing to hear, because you see, if you check out some instructors, there'll be a ton of classes, and it's like, hey, take this, this, and this, and honestly, I think it comes down to the individual student, right? And there are different paths for everybody, and you're going to reach that skill set, right? Whether it's a threshold, a plateau, or whatever it is, at a different point than the next concealed carrier or the next shooter. So Dan, I want to kind of dive into that a little bit more. Is there a minimum skill set that students need to have before attending this class? And then we'll kick that question that I kicked over to Tim back to you. What obstacles are they facing?
You should have some experience drawing from a holster. That's about the most base requirement, I would say. If you're not at a point where you're comfortable doing a standard strong side concealed draw or a standard appendix concealed draw, you're going to struggle. Like Tim said, maybe for certain students, that struggle will be like, this is a learning point for me. I'm going to seek out more training in this particular venue. If you have at least some experience drawing from a holster, you'll be fine. As long as you can draw from a holster safely, you'll be all right. Obstacles. I would say the number one obstacle is a combination of mindset and pocket space. Mindset in that you will see a lot of people who, may have spent $500 or $600 on a handgun, a few $100s on some ammunition to practice with, a few $100 for some training here and there. They're starting to see those dollar signs add up into, the 4-digit range. And now, Dan Brady comes at him and says, Yeah, fork out another $200 to stick in your pocket for a flashlight. You're going to see a lot of people go, and that's the mindset aspect of it, where people have a tough time. What does this $200 light do that this notional $35 light doesn't do? And that's when I have to say, take my class. It's or watch this podcast, because we went into that pretty well. Pocket space. We are in a golden age of everyday carry gear. We've got some really awesome stuff. But man, unless you're wearing cargo pants, you start running out of space, man. Like the regular person everyday carry stuff of, wallet, keys, cell phone, maybe a pocket knife. That's already some space. Now I'm going to add in, a spare magazine, a gun, a flashlight, some pepper spray,
A tourniquet.
A tourniquet. People really start to be like, where am I going to carry all this? So that, I would say, that is an obstacle, getting people to be okay with carrying stuff. I read an article that Jonathan wrote. Did you publish that today, buddy?
The one about the AEDs?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Jonathan wrote a great article about AEDs, and it got my mind spinning. And I'm like, well, shit. Now I'm probably going to go spend $1,200 on a friggin' AED.
I got you.
I would say those are like the primary obstacles. There will occasionally be an information bias obstacle, where you have maybe some higher skill set folks who've been carrying a weapon mounted light for a long period of time. And they'll get into the class and they'll be like, well, when am I going to use my $350 PL350 that I bought from Modlight? When's that come into play? Well, the basic premise of utilizing this light is, identifying your threat. Well, you can't use your $300 weapon light to identify your threat, because right above that $300 light is a muzzle. And if that person doesn't deserve a muzzle, you can't point that light at them. And getting people to break away from the weapon light idea, because from a performance standpoint, shooting in low light with a weapon light is way better, because it's attached to the gun and your normal grip doesn't change. Whereas if you have this, it changes substantially. So your shooting tends to suck, which means you got to work on some different stuff. And people don't like hearing that. People want to be like, I want to do it fast. I want to look like Tim Kelly burning it down. I don't know if you've ever seen Tim Kelly shoot, Jeremy, but you should. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, man, you were talking about where do you carry everything, and I had to go get a freaking fanny pack to carry all my crap.
Hey, it's a purse. You can call it a purse.
It is what it is.
It's a purse.
We need to make fanny packs great again. I mean, that needs to come back.
Well, yeah, because I have the Glock 48 with the Holliston on there. I got the pepper spray in this, the tourniquet. I almost don't have room for my wallet and my other, my keys. And then I have my flashlight in my pocket. I got a pocket knife in here. It's like, where do you put all that stuff? And today I'm like, man, I don't want to I just want to go back to putting the holster on appendix and calling it a day. Then I'm like, I got all this
pocket space is really a big thing, man. I mean, you see the different types of students that we get to come through, all different walks of life, different jobs, different, they work at different hours of the day and night. And, there's so many different variations where, I could say, well, I'm able to carry a gun with a weapon mounted light, a tourniquet, and a handheld flashlight, a pocket knife, some pepper spray, and I'm able to carry all this stuff on me. But I mean, I also don't dress like a girl. So what about my wife? Where is she supposed to carry all that stuff with,
in her yoga pants?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Like, or if she's, if she's trying to wear a dress one day or something like that, it just doesn't fit her lifestyle. So we can't get, sucked into the whole, like, this is the way, we've got to find things that are flexible for them. For instance, my wife, and in terms of her lifestyle, she's homeschooling our kids, and that's kind of her full-time job. So keeping a flashlight on her person all day long, it's not really necessary, but we keep one beside the door in case she needs to look outside for coyotes chasing her ducks or something like that. Otherwise, we keep one in the car, because most of the time, if she's caught out past dark, we're already out in town somewhere. So she keeps one in the vehicle or something like that in case she needs to shove it into her pocket or something and go off from there. There's different ways. I mean, you just have to be able to be flexible in kind of helping assist people along the way in their specific daily life, because it's not all the same.
Yeah, my wife is homeschooling ours.
Jonathan, you said make fanny packs great again. Man, you should have seen Chuck Haggard about a month ago up at Tim's place, walking around in his 1980s jams with a fanny pack on and a t-shirt with no sleeves. It was
man.
I love it. I want to be about that life.
Dude, it was straight out of like 1987. Like it was wild.
The girls are all wearing these crossbody purses. It's like a pouch. It's like it's basically like a fanny pack that goes across their chest. Like, where are those for us? Why does it have to be a fanny
dudes
pack?
wear them all the time too, man. It's 2020.
Verdicts makes some.
Do they?
Yeah, they do.
Maybe I need to dive in and just call it what it is.
I won't judge you, John.
Good. You support me. I appreciate that.
Alex Sansone will, though.
Yes, he will.
Yeah.
Yes, he will.
Yeah, my buddy Andy gives me a hard time about my purse. But it works. I'm probably going to go back to carrying regular. I was doing it because I wanted, everybody talks about, hey, off-body carry doesn't work. Just put a gun on you. Figure out a way to put a gun on you. So I was like, well, let me give off-body carry a try for, a few months and see, really dive into it, get some first-hand experience. That way I can speak from it.
I dig that, man. Not too many people actually do that. I really dig that.
It's nice. I mean, it does make it comfortable, but now I've got so much stuff where I'm like, I just want to put it back on I want to go back to where I was carrying. So
good. We'll
see how it plays out over the next few months. I have two personal kind of questions. Trey's Adventure says he's been considering a fanny pack recently. This is a Verdicts SOCP. It kind of has the pocket in the back for the gun. That way it's a separate component. And if you're in the know, you look at it and you say, okay, there's a gun in there. Yeah, there's a pocket behind it. But, in my line of work, I come across hundreds of people every day and they're none the wiser. So it allows me to carry it somewhat discreetly and have it on my person without having to, deal with the discomfort of carrying a handgun on me every day. So, but I had a couple questions. We didn't talk about strobes. Is that still a thing? The strobe function on the light? Is that like, do I need a light with the strobe function?
No.
Do you want to see Dan Brady have an aneurysm on your podcast?
No strobes. No strobes.
Okay.
The long and short on strobes is all that really effectively does is it limits the number of frames per second that you are capable of seeing. Jeremy, do you play video games?
Yeah, every now and then.
All right, so the gold standard, or the basic standard, is 60 frames per second in order for the refresh rate to look smooth to the human eye. Right? Does that track for you?
Yep.
All right. So if you have a strobe that strobes at 30 frames per second, what did that effectively do? It cut your visual information in half, is what it did. Don't use strobes.
Makes sense. Yeah, Riley Bowman goes in it. He talks about, frames per second and the visual, what that does to us as humans. I was actually watching some of his stuff recently. And then the next one is Phoenix Lights, or Phoenix. Am I saying that right? The FEN.
Yep.
Thoughts on that brand?
For admin lights, they're pretty solid. I carried a Phoenix PD35 for it was my primary duty light for about 6 years before I really got into lights. And to be completely honest with you, I beat the shit out of that light. It was my first 18650 light. I went and bought, I don't know, half a dozen batteries for it. I kept 2 in my patrol car, fully charged all the time. And I used that light to the nth degree. The one downfall of most of the Phoenix lights that I'm aware of, I haven't messed with them in a couple of years, is multi-mode lights. Invariably, when you need a gazillion candela, it will be in admin mode. And that is the exact opposite of what you want. I have been told that there are a couple of lights out there. I don't know who's producing them. I don't know if it's Phoenix or Nightcore or Through Night. One of those companies that is mostly offshore manufacturer. The default setting when you press that rear tail cap is automatically it is at the highest mode, and if you need admin light, you drop it down. That's what I've been told. I haven't personally played around with it. If somebody from one of those companies sees this and wants to send me products to evaluate, feel free. But that's kind of where I stand on that right now. I'm very when it comes to tools designed to save your life, don't skimp. Don't buy discount tourniquets off of Amazon. Buy them from North American Rescue or from Jonathan Willis, or buy them from a quality source where you're getting in wrapper Gen 7 cat tourniquets, or whichever. If you're Tim Kelly and you like the snake staff systems, get a solid, reputable piece of gear. If you're going to use your light defensively, get a solid, reputable piece of gear. That's just the way I look at it. And in the words of my best friend, of course, that's just my opinion. I could be wrong.
So that kind of brought up another, I guess, just a spur of the moment question. 2 lights then, one for admin, one for defensive use, or would it be the lights that we mentioned earlier, right? The cloud defensive, the mod. Do they have a lower setting that could be used for the admin light, or is that just, hey, let's keep them separate? 2 jobs, 2 lights.
Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, I've got one, man. I bought one of the original clouds, MCHs, and this is the one that has the dual output. So the first one is supposed to be more of an administrative, and then the second one is all the candela. If I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't do that. Even the admin portion of this is just way too much light for me. Just trying to find something in the dark. Like if I'm trying to find something in my bedroom, and it's still dark in the morning, and I'm trying not to wake up my wife or something, it lights up the entire room. Mm-hmm. Like it's ridiculous. So, man, it's best to have 2 different ones. And I mean, the one you recommended to me, Dan, I carry around. So it's super easy, and it's like carrying chapstick. It's super easy to pack around. I can't think of the name of it, but yeah, I mean, you think of it like, it just seems like there's a whole lot of stuff I've got to pack around. The administrative light is as small as they make them. You don't ever notice it.
Yeah, you can put a lot of the admin lights, you can put them on your key ring. Like, I mean, they take up the same amount of space or less as your car key. Most of us have, key fob car keys with push to start. I mean, they're the size of the head of this flashlight. I mean, they're pretty substantial. I've got a couple of admin lights that are smaller than a tube of chapstick. They're tiny. And if you need an admin light, what does that mean? It means you have time. You can dig around in your pocket for 3 seconds and find it. But if you need a lighting source for defensive purposes, you need a handful. You need a fistful of light to be able to draw it out of your pocket rapidly, and have a solid purchase on it, and be able to utilize it for defensive purposes. So that's my take, Jeremy.
Cool. I appreciate it. I have one of the Phoenix lights. It does have the 3 mode. It has the 1000, the big lumen. It has your favorite, the strobe light function on there, and then the admin feature. And that strobe light, man, it always, because you got to click through. It's like click, click, click to get to the admin stuff, and 95% of what I need that light for is not throwing all the candela at somebody's face. So it's like bright. Now it's disorienting everybody else that's around me in that area because it's stupid. And then the admin stuff. Before I give you guys the rest of your evening back, I wanted to get a recommendation or a couple shout out for some instructors that you recommend your students train with, either local to you or national instructors, and just some folks that should be on our listeners' radars.
Okay. I'll start off. Well, Gunset Training Group out of Dayton, Ohio. Need to know those dudes. Those would be great, excellent guests on your show. You already have one right next, waiting on that side. There he is. Gunset Training Group. They're great. Phil Groff of Vigor Training, another phenomenal trainer. Wealth of knowledge. He's kind of a hidden gem, man. There's not a ton of people that really know he exists, but he's got some awesome content. He's a great teacher. Let's see. Kent Hauer of Green Mountain Defense is good. He does he does his own podcast as well called Sling and Lead Podcasts. Let's see. Man, I've got a laundry list of just awesome trainers. If you're not familiar with the Range Master community, you should get familiar with the Range Master community. With Tom Givens and the rest of them. Let's see. Man, do I need to go down my list? I've got a long one. Okay. So I just named off a handful. I figure that somebody might not know them.
Well, this question we started asking it a few episodes ago, and it's been a gold mine. Right. And it's several instructors. There's usually 1 or 2 instructors that each guest will recommend, which is, it's really cool to see because, I was talking to Dan in the pre-show about it, 15 years ago when I first started, shooting a gun or whatever, there's a lot of people that I wanted to train with. And then as I learned more, that list got small. And then when I started keying in on those instructors that I was like, hey, these are the folks that have a great reputation in the community. And then I noticed that they started recommending other instructors that weren't quite as well known. And then that kind of undercurrent of, hey, these are the guys like the AJ Zitos, right? Yeah. When you got a bunch of people talking about AJ Zito with Brian Hill and Shelly Hill, it was like, man, these guys are, told Dan, in a couple of years, it's going to be like, oh, they're overnight successes. And it's like, no, they've been doing it for 15 or 20 years. Yeah. It's just, we have 50 states and there's probably, 1,000 dudes that actually go out and train on a regular basis that would, know these guys personally. So
one more, you mentioned local. I'll shout out Gil Navarez of Fortitude Consulting. He's out of Charlotte. So he's just right down the road from us. Another excellent trainer. We've had him out at our place. Really, really good dude.
Awesome. Dan, let's kick it back to you.
I'm glad Tim didn't take all of my friends. Keith Harper of ATR, just northeast of us, Apache wise. Keith's a great dude. He's part of the Range Master family. Runs really good training at
ATR
ATR.
training. ATR training.
That's what I said.
I didn't hear you say it.
Yeah, I mean, you just mentioned Brian and Shelly Hill, great folks. Chuck Haggard, he came out to our place. He came out to Apache about a month and some change ago, for his pepper spray instructor course. Very much like our content. It was very, it was nuanced. It was context based, and it was driven at the carrying citizen, not the cop. It was extremely well done. Very, very good. Very good class. Highly recommend that. Justin Dial, DYAL, Justin Dial. He lives about 40 minutes away from me on the coast in North Carolina. He's one of the most accurate human beings with a handgun. He's just absolutely phenomenal. And his ability to articulate that information is really top notch. And oddly enough, despite living near him for a number of years, I didn't actually bump into him face to face until Tim and I went to Craig Douglas ECQC class, which is also a highly recommended class. If you haven't taken that, you should probably do that.
Absolutely. Take your fanny pack.
Yeah, take your fanny pack. Craig will love it.
Yeah.
He might choke you with it. But
I want to take that's I was talking to Robin, and then when we had him on for their National Girl and a Gun Conference, and I said I want to get out there and take a class, and hopefully there's an instructor I want to train with that would allow those shenanigans on the range. So, Jonathan, what about you, bud?
I have a pretty good group of dudes that are folks I like to do work with a lot. Tactical Defense Institute here in Ohio is a national treasure. Their physical facility is phenomenal, and their instructional group is off the charts. I've been training with them for about 15 years now on the regular, several times a year, and a huge influence on my skill set. Greg Ellifritz is somebody that pretty much in every discipline of work you need to be with. My passion is teaching civilian trauma management, and Greg Ellifritz has been who I would say is easily one of the best people teaching civilian trauma management. His systems collapse medicine class is off the charts. The guy has an encyclopedic understanding of a lot of advanced concepts, but is able to deliver them in an incredible way. Every discipline trained with Greg. I think my Apache brothers are having Snubby and systems collapse this year.
October, he's doing knife fighting skills for concealed carry.
I've taken that class. Phenomenal.
Snubby revolver and his systems collapse medicine.
Another one from Greg is his extreme close quarters class is phenomenal. I've taken that twice. It's a great class. Also, I like there's a fella here in Dayton close to us. He has a company called Tactical Skills Development. His name is Chris Timmerman. Wonderful guy. A lot of us are trying to get him and Tim together to do some work because they're cut from the same cloth. Very similar presences in the way they deliver and the way they shoot. These guys are very similar in a lot of those ways. So love Chris Timmerman, great guy. I recently did a class with 360 Performance, Ashton Ray and Tim Chandler, and really enjoyed their co-teaching style, and their shotgun skill sets are phenomenal. My two favorite classes I have going on right now, by far, are Apache's AEDC classes, both days. I see those now as required, repeated content. I'll be doing those classes a lot. So Dan and Tim aren't gonna, pat their own backs, but I will. My Apache brothers do a phenomenal job in all the content they deliver. So they're a treasure and worthy of the attention and the following they've been developing. So that's pretty awesome. My other favorite class right now is Phil Groff's Grounded and Wounded class. His auto class is phenomenal, but Grounded and Wounded is a particularly special adaptive shooting course, the likes of which I haven't heard of. And I've taken that class a couple of times and really, really enjoy what Phil's putting out. So again, that's Vigor training. Phil Groff, he's phenomenal. So those are my people, and I work with them often.
That's awesome. Huge list, and that's probably one of the better questions that I've come up with, just because of the wealth of knowledge that comes from it. Usually, you guys, and much like tonight's episode, our guests are driving the conversation and really, really steering it, which is awesome because, Tim, as we saw, I'm terrible at asking the questions sometimes, most of the time. So I'm going to give you all the rest of your evening back. I really do appreciate you jumping on with us and sharing the wealth of knowledge that you have. Would love to have you guys back on to talk about your AEDC class. And Jonathan, it sounds like the real world trauma course that you offer. If I'm correct, that's the class that you offer.
Yes, it is. And I'll be doing that with Apache, Tim? February 11, 2024.
Yes, you sure are.
Nice.
And then several times in Dayton in the meantime.
What is going on in Ohio? Because you have Alliance Training Center, and in Dayton, it sounds like this is like a hidden training mecca within the firearms industry.
Dayton's doing pretty well. Of course, Greg Ellifritz just turned trader and went to Texas. We had him until last year, and so now he's down in Austin. But otherwise, we're doing all right in Ohio. It's going pretty good.
Good deal. Remember, it's your life, it's your safety and protection, it's your responsibility. You guys stay safe, and